So, dear Mike, how does it feel to be back on the road and in the studio with what fans feel is the real Nocturnus comeback?
Well, I'll say it's been a long time coming that I've, been wanting to do this and continue the Key story, and because I didn't get to do it back then either, and I finally just decided. I started seeing all these other bands coming out that were split in half, like Entombed and Entombed AD and stuff like that. And, I just said, you know what, I want to do, I want to finish what I started with Nocturnus, with the Key, or at least continue with it, so I just decided to do it. And ever since we kind of changed from After Death to Nocturnus AD, everything just took off, and we haven't stopped since then. And we put out one song, and then got the label interested in us, and they were interested in doing everything that we wanted to do, for an album, video, all that stuff, and so it was weird. They were talking about we started talking to them a year ago exactly, last May, and Profound Lore, and once we started talking to them, he was actually talking about maybe recording. Signing the contract over the summer, getting things ready, recording this year in 2019, and then, having the album come out later, in 2019. Yeah. And I was like, well, I got a studio that has a 2-inch reel-to-reel tape, and we can go record like in a couple months, he'll be ready. So he was like, wow, that's really fast. You guys are ready. And, so we literally signed the contract in June. And in August, we were already in the studio recording.
Musically speaking, Paradox is made by complex song structures along with powerful riffs and evocative atmospheres. How does the composition process work in Nocturnus AD? Any differences with the former Nocturnus lineups?
Well, I would say that every time I write, we go to write something, like a demo or an album, it always seems to be a different process, and for a long time I've been working with Damien, our one guitarist, Damien Heftel, since about 2006, really. We've been, had several versions of After Death, and, he was in another band called Argus with me for a little while. We, they needed a drummer, and they're just more of a cover, old style metal band, and I used to watch them when I was a kid, so I ended up playing drums for them for a couple of years, just as a side thing. And then one of their guitarists got ill, and so actually Damien joined that band with me too for a while. So we did that too. But we've been playing together for a long time, and generally he writes, like especially with the After Death stuff, he writes 90% of the guitar stuff. This album, pretty much almost the whole album was written by me and the two guitar players just in the warehouse, going back and forth with rhythms. And I had this idea to sit down with the two guitar players only and go, okay, Damien, throw out a riff. We'd play it, learn it, learn it and play it, with the other guitar player. Then I'd go, Belial, the other guitar player, throw out a riff. And then we would go back and forth. And I go back to Damien, then I go back to Belial, and we literally wrote almost this whole album in this manner.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure that between the two guitar players writing all the riffs, I wanted to make sure that they both wrote quite a bit on the record, and because they have different styles too, I thought it would be really good to have more people writing on the record than just one person doing most of the riffs. Yeah. And so we never really wrote that way before. It was really cool to do that because we didn't know what we were going to come up with.
And which are the thematical links with the lyrics from the Key?
The Key album is not a whole story. It's like several, stories, but the second half of the album, basically, starting with like Andromeda Strain, Droid Sector, Destroying the Manger and Empire, that's basically the Key story, those 4 songs. So I kind of wanted to keep it around 4 or 5 songs, to the Key story. So when we started, after we always write the music first. And so we wrote all the music, and once we write a song, then I take it and start writing the lyrics to it. And I wrote all the lyrics on the album, but I knew kind of where I wanted to take the Key story all along. basically we took 4 songs and turned those into the Key story.
Yeah.
So it starts with the Antechamber, goes into Return of the Lost Key, goes into Apotheosis, and into Aeon of the Ancient Ones. And then we ended the album with an instrumental,
yeah.
kind of like Nocturne in B minor on Thresholds, kind of faded the album out with an instrumental so that we could start the next record any way we want. So there's 9 songs on the record, and like one's an instrumental, so we have eight actual songs with lyrics. So 4 of those go with that, and then I wrote another song lyrics called Paleolithic.
Yeah.
That is like the next period after Neolithic.
Yeah.
If you look at Nocturnus, we have kind of like 2 styles of songs. One that kind of tells a story,
yeah,
or one that describes like a historical or scientific event. So we did, Paleolithic is the Neolithic continuation, and then Lake of Fire and Standing in Blood always kind of went together as 2 songs that kind of like tell a story together.
Yeah.
So I took those 2 and we wrote a third song called Seizing the Throne, which is what we start the new record with. And then there are 2 songs that just are kind of standalone thing, Procession of the Equinoxes, which you've heard.
Yeah.
And that one's, about the precession of the poles, the magnetic poles, and how they shift over time, and that it's happening like faster and faster, and it's coming faster. And there's like, just lately, it seems funny, I wrote that song, the lyrics probably almost a year ago. We've been playing that one for a little while live here and there. But it's like, now you see in the news, I just posted one thing like the last month, I've seen 2 articles now about how fast the poles are speeding up, and how the reversal is starting to happen quicker and quicker, and magnetic north is changing, and all kinds of crazy stuff's happening. So that song it's about something that's really going on right now. And then we have another song that I called the Bandar Sign, which is about the actual Necronomicon symbol, and it's the story of the Mad Arab, basically set to music.
Yeah, and what can you tell us about the amazing artwork of the album?
I really had liked, of course, Dan Seagrave did the Key cover,
yeah.
And I definitely wanted something that's going to continue with the Key character that was on the cover, and so I wanted to keep using him like a mascot, basically, like Iron Maiden has Eddie. So we have our guy. So I finally gave him a name too.
Dr. Magus.
Dr. Magus. Yeah. So yeah, Dr. Alan William Magus is his full name, and it's weird. It just kind of popped into my head, to give him. I've always wanted to. I didn't know what to call him. I've called him an android. I called him a robot. I've called him, a half human, half robot thing, character, mascot, but he never really had a name, even though he had a story, he didn't really have a name. And in the story on the Key, he was, a scientist, back then. So I decided to go ahead and give him a name, and that name kind of came into my mind. Yeah. So I gave him that. And with that, I wanted to keep the artwork going. And we did have, Dan Seagrave's like very expensive now, and I would have liked to have used him, but budget-wise, I don't think we could have, used him. So we were going to use Mark Cooper, and because he did a T-shirt for us, and when I contacted him, he had like 4 album covers to do in a row that were commissioned already and paid for. So it was like I had to find somebody else. So we had this other guy named Timbal Cayano, who he actually had did a shirt for us, and the artwork, and we used that character, Dr. Magus, and it came out fantastic. I was like, wow, this is blowing my mind how good it is, and he definitely caught that Seagrave style that he did the Key cover in, and so I asked him if he wanted to do the cover, and he was like, yes, are you kidding me? I'd love to do it. And, being that it's a gatefold, like the Key was a gatefold as well, well, it was supposed to be a gatefold, but Earache would never make a gatefold for the Key to where you could see the whole artwork.
Yeah.
The front cover and the back cover all go together, and it's still to this day, they've never done the Key in a gatefold. And I even tried to ask Dig if he would do that, for a reissue, and he wouldn't even answer me. So another thing, Profound Lore was like, sure, let's do a gatefold and make the artwork, look really good. So we used Tim Boole to do the artwork, and he actually did a painting, of the cover. It is an actual painting. A lot of people use digital art now, and I do digital art too, but it's not that great, as compared to what people can do in paintings, is what I'm saying. So he just did, I worked with him quite a bit. We changed, he would keep showing me little parts of it. I gave him all the ideas. The whole album cover is a depiction of the song The Antechamber, which is like a chamber underneath the Sphinx that has all this alien machinery in it, and he puts the key in it, which is our symbol, with a lightning bolt pentagram, and it makes the a portal open, and all these creatures come through the portal.
Yeah.
So that's basically that song where the key left off is where this kind of starts back up.
Which are your best and worst memories of the days with Nocturnus?
Well, I mean, obviously getting signed, and doing the, going out at, we were all pretty young back then, and getting signed like that to a major label like Earache, and we got literally, like, it was like once we put out that second demo, things went pretty fast, and we got signed. We did the album real fast. We went right out on tour. Back then, the labels used to give you a lot of tour support money and stuff like that. So we went right out on tour and did, that, the European tour with Bolt Thrower, and then right into a tour with, the Grind Crusher tour with Napalm Death in the United States. And that just was like, everything was going really, really, I thought everything was going great. Worst thing was probably that day we when things were going bad, getting a vocalist. The label suggested, because the guitar players didn't move around and the keyboard player was stuck behind the keyboards. So basically the labels, said we didn't have much stage presence and live, and that we needed to either have me be a front man or get a front man. And I'm really more of a drummer than a vocalist myself, I think. I feel that that's more me, so I said, well, I didn't want to do that. I said, let's not do that. Let's just keep things the way they are and keep going. And everybody's like, well, I don't know. And then the label came back and said, look, if you don't get a vocalist, a front man, basically, that we will cut your budget for the second record, and we will not give you a video, because they had promised us a video. So everybody in the band was like, oh, we're not going to get this, and we're not going to get that. I said, no, they're just, they're just playing hardball with us. But everybody else folded and said, no, let's get a singer. So it was basically, we had 5 people in the band at that time. It was basically 4-1 going, nope, we're going to get a front man. And the problem was, even though, I started Nocturnus, we all signed the record contract separately.
Yeah.
And so we all, had like the same stake in the situation, I would say, even, it was all an even thing. And we usually did do stuff by vote. So I was not into it, but, I said, okay, let's get a vocalist, and see how it works out. And of course we went on tour and things didn't go that great. A lot of people like Thresholds, but it sold like a third of what the Key did. And, and then we went out on tour and people were coming up to me going, why aren't you singing anymore? This is not Nocturnus anymore. And they were saying things like that right in front of the vocalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I was like, this is not good. And so there was starting to be like lots of tension in the band. There was a problem. The keyboard player, on the second record, if you noticed, I didn't write hardly any of the lyrics. Like on the first record, I wrote almost everything except for Mike Davis would give me like lines, like here, he'd give me ideas like, here, put this line in there and put this line in there and put this line in there, and then fill out the rest. So we did that, like songs like Droid Sector and Neolithic were his ideas, but I did most of the lyrics, even though he would come up with ideas and stuff like that. But now on the second record, Thresholds, I hardly wrote anything. I think I wrote a couple lines on like 2 songs. Yeah. And I had stuff written for a couple of the songs, but everybody went against what I wanted to write. The more evil kind of lyrics, and they wanted to go more sci-fi, even more sci-fi, and go like Dream Theater direction, because back then Dream Theater was just starting to get huge. Yeah. And and everybody was like, we could be the next Dream Theater, we could make all this money. And I'm like, why don't we just do what we do, and not worry about making money and doing all these things that the label wants us to do that they're telling us is going to make us all this money. Usually the labels are wrong, I have to say.
Yeah.
Most times when bands say they followed what the label wanted them to do, it was disastrous for the band. And that's, that's history. So basically, after we did that second tour, we came back, and I came into the room after we were just coming back into the warehouse to set everything back up to start playing again and writing for a third album, and I walked into the warehouse and everybody had their heads down and sitting there, and none of the equipment was put back anywhere. And I was like, "What's up?" And they were like, "Well, we just think that you're not up with what we want to do in the band, and there's 5 of us against you now, and it's like we don't want to go for the occult stuff. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. And we think, you're not happy in this band anymore." They were telling me what I thought, and they're like, "So basically, we're going to fire you, and I'm like, "What? This is Nocturnus is my band. How can you fire me?" They're like, "Well, we talked to the label, and the label said, go ahead and do what you got to do." And I was like, "Really? The label said that?" And the weird thing was, I was going to play drums on the next Acheron record anyway, even though I was in Nocturnus, because I talked to Vince about that. Because he was when we were recording Thresholds, he was in the B room of Morrisound. We were in the A room redoing Rites of the Black Mass. He was remixing it and stuff. So I ended up singing some backups on that just because I happened to be in the studio. I like Vince; he's a great person. So I was like, "Dude, if you want me to play drums for you, I'll play on the next record." I said, I was like, I was in Nocturnus, so I was like, I don't know how much I can do for you after that, but I definitely play drums for you, on the record. Vince had a warehouse 3 doors down from our warehouse, the Nocturnus warehouse, because I was going to practice with both bands, And so literally the day they fired me, Vince came over there. I told him what happened. He's like, "Wow." He goes, "Well, I guess if you want to join Acheron full time." I was like, "Okay." So we literally walked my drums from the Nocturnus warehouse to the Acheron warehouse. And I was in Acheron the same day that I was fired from Nocturnus. Yeah. And then I ended up doing 2 albums with and a 7-inch with Acheron, and and Nocturnus ended up breaking up.
Yeah, that's
so
unbelievable.
And that's the way things went, But it's a crazy story, but it's true.
So, which final message and greeting to the Italian fans of Mike Browning and Nocturnus AD would you send out?
Well, I just want to say I hope we can play there again. It's been a really long time since we've gotten to play there.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you guys have any festivals there, like bigger festivals right there in Italy. But that would be something interesting that I'd like to look into to see if there's a festival there or something we could do possibly. Because the problem with us is we haven't been able to do a lot of touring because we have families and jobs and things like that. So we try to look more to things we could do over weekends, like 1 or 2 festivals or a festival and a show where we can go and fly out and fly back and still do these things and still play for lots of people, Since we can't do a big, long tour right now, that's the main thing we look for is really good festivals to play on. And luckily we're at a position where we can do that, Because some of the best bands, I come from there. I love all the Italian horror bands that have come out of there. and it's just been when you stuff like Goblin, what can you say? They started all this.
Yeah.
I've always liked that, and back when I was starting out. And even back in Morbid Angel days, Necrodeath,
yeah.
Fantastic band to me. I love those guys, and they're back together again now and really sounding good. I don't know if you've heard their new stuff, but wow, they've made a huge comeback for, so, stuff like that. I like, Italy, and I'd love to come back there. We had some great times there when we did tour there, and, it'd be great to come back and see the people again and the culture and everything. I love it over there.